frugal with your knitting isn't just about spending less money or buying cheap yarn. It's about finding ways to spend smarter and more resourcefully. With consumer costs rising and rising, I think a lot of us can relate to trying to save money while still maintaining our hobbies and the things that bring us joy and entertainment. I find myself in that boat. I'm looking for ways to buy yarn and fiber and tools without feeling like I'm overspending on what I'm getting and without significantly reducing how many projects I make. The point is that you don't have to buy the cheapest version to be frugal, and you don't even have to be on a budget. Frugality is a mindset you have when you're spending your money so that you're using what you buy, you're being resourceful where you buy things from, and you're getting the most you can out of what you're spending your hard-earned money on. There are also so many benefits to just buying fewer new items and reusing what you have. So while we knit and chat, I'm going to share some practical tips on saving money when you buy yarn and buying intentionally so you're actually using what you buy. I just started a new pair of socks. I made it through the cuff, so now I'm just working stockinette in the round. I think I'm just gonna make these vanilla socks, and I'm using this Zauberball Crazy yarn that I had in my stash. This is a sport weight yarn, so I'm knitting these on 1.5 millimeters. It's like the size right in between a US 1 and a 2. And I cast on fewer stitches than I normally would. I think I cast on like 52 stitches. So here's where I'm starting, and let's see where I'm at the end of this. I've structured this video into 3 main parts. First, we're going to talk about how to reuse what you have, so you don't need to bring in anything new to keep knitting. These things are going to cost you $0. Second, I'll go through some practical ways to save money on what you buy, as well as how to find some things for free, since that is a big part of being frugal. And finally, I want to share a mindset shift that might sound a little surprising coming from someone who is sharing what they knit on social media, but it's something I'm genuine about, and it's something I think more people should adopt as a mentality. Let's get into it. There are a lot of tips, so I'm gonna go through these kind of fast. Anyone can do this. You don't have to be on a budget to reuse what you have. You don't even have to be someone who usually buys inexpensive stuff. Anyone can do this, and in fact, everyone should do this. I don't feel the need to tell people what to do very often. Like, you live your own life, you should make your own choices. But this is something that I feel very strongly about. You should be repurposing what you have, or at least give it to someone who will use it. So here are some ways that you can actually repurpose your stuff. Give me 1 second, my yarn just got all tangled. So tip 1 is to reuse yarn from projects that you no longer like. I need to do this. I have a few sweaters that I don't wear, but I still like the yarn. If you have several sweaters you want to reclaim, I think it would be fun to turn this into a challenge where like every quarter of the year you tackle a new sweater, or maybe it's like a side project where every time you finish something with new yarn, you then bring out one of your old sweaters and reknit it. I also think it would be a fun challenge to knit something totally different with the old yarn. So like maybe you're frogging a color work pullover and you want to knit a striped cardigan, or you're frogging a cabled sweater and you decide to knit like a trendy oversized stockinette sweater. Pull out your unfinished objects, we all have them. Find that one whip where you're like, oh yeah, I liked that yarn, and give yourself permission to frog it. No guilt, no shame, because you're gonna find a project that you like way more and you're gonna use that yarn the way God intended. Tip 2, make scrappy projects, and they don't have to look scrappy. You can use your larger leftovers like partial skeins to knit the color work part of a yoke, or to knit a striped sweater or accessories. You can look for advent patterns that are designed to use mini skeins and just use your scraps instead. Like, nobody's gonna know. You're gonna get the exact same effect, and unless you're like me and you tell everyone every detail about all of your projects, then it makes no difference. Type mini skein or advent into Ravelry's pattern search. There are so many out there. Park and Knit also has some patterns where you hold a bunch of yarns together, and that's a good way to use up leftovers, but it looks a little bit more eclectic than like scrappy. Put all your scraps out and see if you can find like a gradient or a fade. Even if you have small amounts, I think like some fade hand warmers or socks could be cool. Maybe you have small amounts of mohair that you could pair with your colors to blend the fade. Tip 3, over dye yarn you don't love. I've done this a few times, and honestly, it's a lot of fun because if you're not a very experienced dyer, you never really know what you're gonna get. I will say that you might have to buy some dye materials. If you go the acid dye route, I would really recommend getting like a kit of primary colors and then just create the colors that you want instead of buying those exact colors. And also, if you're gonna get into dyeing, you're gonna need new tools that you don't use in your kitchen for food. You wanna keep those separate, but don't buy new. Don't buy on Amazon. I guarantee you everything from pots to measuring spoons to old towels, you're gonna find at the thrift store or the charity shop. And if you're just dyeing for fun, you probably don't need a thermometer, you don't need a pH tester. You can buy those things once you get more established, but just start out with the basics. You don't need a ton of stuff. Vinegar works perfectly as a mordant. Use what you already have. But there are other ways to dye. Natural dyeing can be cheap or free. Some people dye with Kool-Aid. Just make sure that you're using what you need to set the dye so that it doesn't like fade quickly. Also ask around. You might know someone who dyes things, or there might be somebody in your knitting circle who has tried it out and they already have the materials. I have a Dharma dye kit that I bought a few years ago, and if somebody was talking about wanting to learn how to dye, I would totally let them borrow it. So spark up some conversations about what you want to do. You never know when there's somebody in your community who is willing to share. Tip 4 is you don't need extra stuff. This tip is just straight up, you don't need to buy a lot of the stuff you see. Knitting accessories are expensive. You really don't need most of them to knit. Allie from Allie Makes Everything has talked about how she will mock things up to determine if she actually needs something before she buys it. I think that's fantastic advice. Another thing is that when you are buying something, look outside of the context of crafting, because things that are branded for crafting are often more expensive than something that's a little bit more generic. So for example, instead of buying blocking mats, you could buy those like garage mats or exercise mats that you can find in home improvement stores, or I've seen them in the car aisle of supermarkets. Use jump rings or light bulb safety pins instead of stitch markers. Sewing pins are often cheaper than blocking pins. Try-it-on cords are cheaper when you buy them as jewelry cord, and just get creative with it. Like I reuse the bags I get from online orders and I put my knitting in those bags. So ultimately, I just want you to be in this headspace that the first thing you do doesn't need to be going out and buying something. Look at what you already have, repurpose things, get creative with it, or honestly just do without. There are so many things that I just don't buy because I don't feel the need to, and I'm not any less of a knitter because I don't have those things. Of course, it's not practical to think that we would never buy yarn again, and it's also not wrong to buy yarn. So here are some practical ways that you can save money when you're buying yarn. Tip 5, shop destashes. Buying secondhand yarn from a destash is a great way to save money on yarn. Ravelry has some destash groups. You can also search people's stashes by going into the advanced search. You can filter to only see what people are willing to trade or sell. You can also filter by country to save some money on shipping costs, and you can filter by distance from you if you want to arrange for an in-person pickup. I found some really good deals on there. I've also heard that Facebook has some good destash groups, and you can also try looking on Marketplace. But my favorite way to buy destash yarn is the subreddit Yarn Swap. What I found is that you have to be fast, so check it regularly, but there are a lot of like sweater quantities on there, and there's some good stuff. I found this sweater quantity of Rowan felted tweed for a decent % off. I've also found spinning fiber, which is awesome because that's harder to find secondhand, but I've noticed people are destashing fiber more frequently on Yarn Swap lately. And I would always recommend looking up the original cost of the yarn if you can find it, just to make sure that you're getting what feels like a good deal to you. And when you're buying from a stranger, always make sure to use a platform that has buyer's protection, use goods and services, don't use friends and family. Tip 6 is to shop budget yarns. Budget yarns are becoming harder to find, especially as those like reliable middle tiers for consumers are starting to go away or get pricey, but there are still some budget yarns out there. What I've heard is that Knit Picks might not be the budget yarn anymore. I think their stuff is getting kind of expensive, but I've always really liked their palette yarn because it's just a solid yarn. It comes in a ton of colors. Webb's Huntington from yarn.com is a great workhorse yarn. It's very soft. Their Hampton and Northfield yarn lines are also nice. They're like a wool alpaca silk blend, and they're quite affordable for what you're getting. I knit my Hanko out of that yarn and I like it a lot. Drops yarn seems to still be chugging along as an affordable yarn while still maintaining its quality. I've knit quite a few sweaters out of Drops yarn. I've always gotten mine from Wool Warehouse. The shipping to the US takes a while, but it's not super pricey. Patton's worsted and sock yarns are pretty good. You can usually find those at big box stores. Obligatory Rip Joanne. Holst Garn is another affordable yarn. I have not personally worked with it, but I would love to try it. I did check their website, and shipping from Denmark to the US isn't too bad. For about a sweater's quantity, it was still less than 15 USD, but there are also US yarn stores that sell it. Another tip is to look for acrylic wool blends because those are often less expensive, but you're still getting a nice yarn. Tip 7 is to shop sales. This one's pretty obvious, but I just wanted to share a few things that I've picked up. Summer sales are happening right now. There are also sales to clear out warehouses as companies are trying to figure out tariffs and all of that. Usually companies will run fall sales for yarn, so be on the lookout. I will always buy multiple projects worth of yarn to get bulk discounts or save money on shipping if I know I'm going to use all that yarn. Or you can buy larger skeins or cones to get the same quality for cheaper. Sign up for mailing lists. You can almost always get 10 to 15% off just by giving them your email, which if you were going to buy from that company anyway was already something you were going to give them. Wool & Co. online has free shipping. They also have a 10% discount on certain yarns if you hit their threshold. What I will say as a chronic sale buyer and free shipping chaser is that sometimes it pushes you to buy stuff that you wouldn't normally buy and that you might not use. That's just been my experience. I have had to kind of learn the hard way that sometimes it's cheaper in the long run to only buy what you know you're going to use, and that's also more sustainable. What you could do if you're trying to hit a threshold is place a large order and then split it with friends. Also look for dyer and mill sales. These are usually just advertised if you're a repeat customer, so get on those mailing lists. I've shopped 2 of Brooklyn Tweed's overstock sales where they were trying to clear out less popular colorways, and I got like 50% off that yarn. It was great. Obviously Brooklyn Tweed is no longer selling yarn, but look for other dyers and mills who might run those types of sales. I've heard that littleknits.com will run closeout sales on some nice yarn, and I've never done this because I just found out about it, but Goodwill has a store online, so you could search for yarn on shopgoodwill.com. When I was looking on there, I found mostly like big grab bags with a lot of acrylic yarn, but that's an option if you want to check it out. Tip 8 is to unravel sweaters. I know this is a bit of a nuanced topic. Some people say you shouldn't unravel sweaters of certain sizes that are hard to find. But if you're looking for used sweaters to unravel, I would say look outside of thrift stores. You could look at estate sales. The other day, I saw a sign advertising an estate sale in my neighborhood, so sometimes you just stumble across them. Garage sales and neighborhood sales are still happening in my area. I think those are great. You can also look at community sales that will happen like once or twice a year, often at like churches or other types of groups. I recently found all of this scrap fabric that I'm going to turn into a quilt for a total of $6. So you could find sweaters for yarn or even the yarn itself at places like that. I knit this sweater, it's the Granito by Hoki Locatelli, out of a secondhand sweater that I unraveled. And as far as how to unravel the sweater, Engineering Knits made a good video that covers like everything you need to know. There's also the Unravelers subreddit that has some good info and inspiration. Tip 9 is to connect with your community. There are lots of ways to get yarn for cheap or free. Do a yarn swap with your friends. Sometimes yarn stores will facilitate this. Yarn stores will also often have free libraries of donated yarn. Look at creative reuse stores and fiber arts collectives. They'll often have cheaper yarn that can be really nice, or they might know some people and connect you to some good resources. So those are great places to check out. Also just ask around. You never know who might have a yarn stash that they're trying to get rid of. This is a hobby that people often start and then realize they're not really into it, but they bought some yarn, and you might be the perfect person that they want to give it to. Tip 10 is to find free patterns. Patterns obviously are not the bulk of the cost of most projects, but there are just tons of free ones out there, so you can save some money there. You can find pattern books and magazines at your library, and if they don't have the exact one that you want, you can request it. That also helps out libraries because it tells them that people are wanting to use their resources. Your local knitting or weaving guild might also have a book library that you can borrow from. You can also find some patterns for free on archive.org. I found a ton of knitting magazines. There might be some books on there as well. A lot of basic construction items are free on Ravelry. You might have to use the advanced search to find what you're looking for. And those are often in pattern books as well. So you don't necessarily need to buy basic patterns. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy them. I'm just saying you don't necessarily have to. Also, many big yarn brands will publish patterns for free that are often quite good. Barocco is one that I really like. There's also Rowan, Yarn Inspirations, Lion Brand, Pearl Soho. I would stay away from the Drops Garn Studio patterns though, personally. But there are honestly so many ways to save money when you're buying patterns in yarn, whether you're just buying it secondhand or you're connecting with the right people. When I was a freshman in college, I had 2 separate people give me a pretty decent chunk of their yarn stash. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I'm still knitting today. You just never know like what people are willing to get rid of until you talk to them. And if you don't know anyone like that in person, there are a lot of people online who are trying to sell their stash. So part 3 is that mindset shift that I was talking about earlier. This is about changing the way you choose your projects, specifically so that they take longer. You want to find patterns that will keep you busy, keep you occupied, because when you're in that frugal mindset, it's not about how quickly you can finish things, it's about the process. So tip 11 is to pick projects that maximize your enjoyment. You could choose complicated projects that take you longer and therefore you spend less money per hour of entertainment. Cables, lace, complex construction, long cardigans, something new you've never tried before. Any project that will take you longer than just a standard stockinette sweater. Also, buy thinner yarn weight. Don't buy worsted or bulky yarn. Try lace weight. Have you ever tried lace weight? It's not very popular, but I feel like it could be. Buy an inexpensive main color and use your expensive stuff for the contrast color. That way you can still use your spin cycle and your expensive yarn, but you're not spending $400+ on each sweater all the time. Or don't knit color work at all because it basically doubles the yarn. And along those same lines, don't hold multiple strands together. That is going to double or triple your yarn cost. Another idea is to spin your own yarn. It's not necessarily cheaper, but it does extend how much enjoyment you can get from the same materials. Which leads me to my final tip, which is more of a proclamation. You don't need to finish things quickly. We can really feel that pressure to churn out projects so that we have finished objects to show. And especially if you're someone who shares what you're making online, which is a lot of us, you can definitely feel that pressure to finish things because then you get to show off another thing. But I want you to change your mindset on this, especially if you're not a content creator. This is your hobby. Allow it to entertain you for a long ass time. I can spend $40 and then get 40 hours of entertainment out of that. And I'm a person who thrives on finishing my projects, so you might look at me and think that I just want to finish things. But to me, finishing things is so different from finishing things as quickly as I can. I get so much satisfaction out of problem solving, redoing things, making things exactly as I want them, and honestly, that usually means that I take longer to finish things that I need to. But going back to practical tips, another thing you can do is work on a variety of projects. So you can finish some smaller ones while you're working on those big ones. But the point is that this is such a cool hobby because it taps into the important parts of being intentional, being mindful, being frugal. You can't produce fast fashion. You are forced to participate in slow fashion. And with the internet and social media and the rise of AI, there are so few things that get me off my phone, stop me from doom scrolling, that I just want to hold on to all the ways that this hobby keeps me grounded. All right, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. So that's my little knit and chat. Here is where I'm at on my sock. I'm planning on doing more videos like this where I knit and discuss a topic. Groundbreaking, I know. But I do want to know what you think about this format and if you're interested in more of what I have to say about knitting or if grandma's off her rocker, because sometimes it's hard for me to tell. As always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I love your feedback. I'm working on a lot of projects right now. Tour de Fleece really sparked a lot of inspiration and motivation for me. I came out of that feeling really excited to work on more stuff, create more videos, and it just really rejuvenated me. And I'm just trying some stuff out with my YouTube channel right now, so I'm so happy you're here watching to the end. But now, you gotta go. Be a frugal knitter.